Hello, church. Good to see you today. We are continuing our study in chapter 27 of Proverbs, and it has to do with a myriad of things, but I'm grateful for that because life has many highs and lows and involves many things. So I'm grateful for the wisdom that God gives us in Proverbs, specifically 27 today. All of it is pointing to whatever you're doing, honor Christ. Honor God by how you live. Whether it is leading something, whether it is a time to serve, whether sometimes leading is serving, other times it's how do you deal with your friends, how do you deal with your family, how do you deal with your work. All of it is pointing to let's honor God when we're doing these things. So let's jump in. Verse 1 reads of chapter 27, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." We are in the middle of a very uncertain, very volatile time with all the COVID-19 stuff. And if anyone claimed that they knew what was going to happen in February, that all the world would stop in March, I would challenge them, I'll be honest, I don't think I would believe them. For the people that claim that they know exactly what's going to happen this summer and in this fall, whether it has to do with church stuff or work stuff or school stuff or sports, I challenge them, and I kind of want to say, you don't really know. What this verse is warning us against is whenever we have pride and whenever we boast in our plans and in our money and in our schemes, and really we shouldn't boast or have pride in them because we don't really know what's going to happen. Jesus says in his prayer, "Give us this day our daily bread." And he's saying depend on God from day to day. Live in the moment from day to day. In Philippians 4, Paul would say, rejoice daily, every day, rejoice. Whenever we're rejoicing, it doesn't mean that we ignore the negative, but it is comforting, and we do need to make it known that we trust God and that whatever happens, both good and bad, God is on our side and he is working, and that is something to be glad about. So moving on into verse 5, it says, "Better is open rebuke than hidden love." A true friendship, a true relationship has several things. It has accountability. You are willing to say what needs to be said. It involves forgiveness. Y'all have gone through things before where maybe there was a misunderstanding or feelings were hurt, but you meet together and you want to keep going. There's that continued, I value you so much that let's make this work. There's forgiveness. Any kind of friendship or relationship where you don't really say what needs to be said, it's really just a shallow appreciation. At a distance, you're like, hey, that person, I like him or her, but there's not true friendship, there's not true relationship. To have a godly friendship, you need to be willing and you need to have enough care to say the hard things. Then kind of going forward, in verse 6, it talks about this further. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. If you don't care, you're just going to say what you think that person wants to hear, or just what is easiest to end that conversation. It kind of makes me think of a time whenever Kimberly and I were dating. We weren't married yet, and she was going on a road trip to see her parents in Sherman, Texas. And she was like, do you think my tires are good? Do you think the air pressure is good for my tires? And there's a part of me that is thinking, I'm sure it's fine. You look at it, it doesn't look low. But then I started thinking a little more, and it's like, I don't really know the air pressure, and that is a far drive, and I don't want anything to happen to this wonderful woman that I'm dating. So then what do? I get out the air pressure meter, and I measure it. And then one of them actually was a little low, so I then put air in her tire. If you actually care, if you're a good friend, you will see to it that you actually say what needs to be said. If there's not the hard conversations, it's because you probably don't care enough. It's challenging, but it's true. Moving on in verse 8, it's talking about where's home. Like a bird that flees its nest is anyone who flees from home. Growing up, my family, we moved several times. I was always someone that was willing to jump into situations. In fact, I like the challenge of jumping into a new social setting and make friends and be friendly. But I think growing up, I didn't quite understand the beauty of having friends and family to share life with. And so much of the last decade of my life, I feel like God has been teaching me just what good there is whenever you pour in to your family's life, your distant relatives' lives, but also your friends. Because if you're always starting new chapters with new people and not continuing with the old, you lose out on so much of what God can do in your friendships and relationships. So yes, we will move from city to city, state to state, or even country to country, but don't be so eager to leave the people and the friendships and just the regions that you've invested your life in. You're missing out on what God can bless you with. Moving on into verse 10, it's kind of continuing how to treat friends and family and people around you. Do not forsake your friend or a friend of your family, and do not go to your relative's house when disaster strikes you. Better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. And this is a warning. It's saying, hey, friends and family are good, but whenever there's something going on that is an emergency, do you have the friends of your neighbors around to help you? And this is challenging for me. I know the names of my neighbors, but we don't really share life together. And it kind of comes at an awkward time when in the shelter in place and being at home quarantined, we probably shouldn't, but we have been waving at one another, and whenever things kind of calm down, I really should still be investing in the neighbors around me, because we can offer each other assistance, and whenever there's an emergency, we can look after one another, but we can also share life with the people that we don't have blood relations to. They're your neighbors. Moving on in verse 17, it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. When you invest in people's lives, you grow to appreciate them at a much deeper level. Sometimes to appreciate certain people, and maybe I'm one of them, it takes a long time before you begin to actually appreciate them, probably the way that you should. And that might be some of the iron sharpening that God is talking about here, is that you will see that some people, they have wonderful, wonderful gifts, but you got to stick with them. You have to keep sharpening them, and you have to let them sharpen you. And then in verse 19, it reads, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. This passage stood out because sometimes you don't really know what's even going on in your life unless you slow down to look at your life as a whole. If you have anger in your heart, it might take some time of reflection to actually see that there's anger in your heart and it's affecting all areas of your life. You start to see that maybe you're being a little bitter towards your family and your friends. Maybe you have kind of a jaded view about how people treat you in your workplace. Or you just kind of think that instead of being optimistic towards life, you're thinking that deep down, life is kind of out to get you. Slow down and think about it. And then if you realize that love isn't at the heart of your life, if you don't have joy in your heart, start talking with God about that. Say, God, I sense anger in me. I sense jealousy in my heart. And I know that those things probably shouldn't be there. Help me grow with you, God, to where I can be changed by love rather than the negative evils of the world. And then kind of in closing, chapter 27 ends 25 through 27. I'm going to read it and then just share one last thought. It reads, when the hay is removed and new growth appears and the grass from the hills is gathered in, the lambs will provide you with clothing and the goats with the price of the field. You will have plenty of goat's milk to feed you and your family and to nourish your servant girls. There's a connection that is very prevalent in the Old Testament, and it does continue in the New Testament, but it's the connection to the land. God says, hey, I've chosen you and I'm going to provide the promised land. But then kind of digging a little deeper, he continues to make the connection that if you follow me and if you're devoted to me, you will have what is needed to enjoy the beautiful life that I want you to live. Now we see with the Israelites, they go to other gods. They then want their government to be what sustains them instead of God, and they eventually get separated from the land. Now, we know that God's promise and his blessing isn't cut off, but it is diminished because they didn't follow him like he wanted them to. And for us, kind of coming full circle, the way that this chapter began is, don't boast about tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen. And then it ends with, hey, follow God and he will provide for you what is needed. And not just the bare minimum, but he gives what is needed in huge amounts, even to where you are able to nourish everyone that is a part of your clan and your family and your world. So the message is, let's trust God every single day, even when we don't know what it has in store. Have a wonderful day.